Hi, I'm Evan Jones. Welcome to the Lawschooli.com explanation for PT32 Game 3. Nice to have you here. This is a game that reminds us that just because it's a basic ordering game doesn't mean it's necessarily easy. In this game, we get a bunch of rules, and beyond that, some of them are a bit unusual. We get some rules telling us that things have to be a minimum of X number of spaces apart, which is not a rule that you encounter frequently. Not too hard conceptually to understand it, but working with it is a little harder, and there's also some rules that aren't talked about very often, making them really easy to forget. For the bass, I've laid that out already. We have 8 musical compositions in a row, so that's pretty easy to conceptualize. We know that's got a nice inherent sense of order, and that's going to become our bass. As for our variables, let me get them drawn in up here. Here they are, F, H, L, O, P, R, S, and T, and exactly one of these is going in each of these spots. Nothing complicated as far as that goes. This is a classic basic ordering one-to-one game. Now let's jump into the rules where things get a little harder. The first thing we get is an OR rule. So if you feel shaky on this, head back to the lesson on OR rules. We are told that T has to be immediately before F. We see either T, F in a block, or we're going to see RT in a block. And remember, unless you're told otherwise and you're not here, OR rules are inclusive. So it would be conceivable to see the order R, F, T. I don't believe that comes into play in this game, but just remember that this is an inclusive meaning of OR, meaning both these are possible. They'll tell you either or if not both are possible. Next, we know that a minimum of 2 compositions are performed between F and R. So that would look like doing our block, like you're probably very used to seeing this, right? Where you know there's exactly 2 between R and F. Unfortunately, this time it's not bounded. So don't put anything around your block, and then I would write min right in here to remind us that we have a minimum of 2 spaces. They can be further apart. If you want to put an arrow in, showing that that can expand, anything to make yourself remember that it's a minimum of 2, but more is possible. Then we get O performed first or fifth, nothing very difficult there. We draw our arrows, dropping them into the 2 spots where he can be. Then a simple dual option, but one that is really easy to forget. With all these rules, don't forget these little unobtrusive rules that they throw in here. L and H are the only 2 variables that can go in the 8th spot, so we represent that internally as a dual option. Now we get a simple sequencing rule, though nothing simple when you've got this many rules. P is performed at some time before S. And then we get another one of these rules that S is minimum 1 away from O. So S, then O, and we get a min of 1 right in there. And I drew my arrow again so that I know that can expand. They can be further apart, but that's the minimum. So at this point, I think rather than sitting down and trying to figure out if there's any inferences here, I don't see anything that readily bumps out at me. So I'm thinking I'm just going to get my courage up and head right into the game. And that's what you should do too. So let's tackle the questions. We're not going to analyze the acceptability question deeply, 12. You do that the same way you do any acceptability question, which is you take a look at your rules one at a time and see which order they're violated in. So take TF or RT. We got to see that TF or RT. We don't see it in B, that's out. And then you'd move on to the next rule, do that same thing. Here we're left with A standing as the right answer. For 13, we're asked about where P cannot be performed. And I'm still thinking this is going to be a pretty easy question, so I'm going to not think deeply about these at first on my first pass, and I'm going to see if there's one that pops out at me as the right answer. So P cannot be performed second. I'm like, why not? You know, I'm not going to look deeply at it. Third, fourth, all this stuff in the middle, not going to look at it deeply. 6, that might be more likely to not work because of this PS rule, but what about 7th? I get down to E, P is in 7th. Well, I know that it can't be there because L or H have to go in 8. There's no room for S. So that's my right answer. Remember to take a pass and do a scan for an easy one on early questions in the game. If you're trying out every order to see if it works, like you're saying, okay, can P go second, and you're trying to fill in the variables, you're going to be wasting major time. That's something to look at in your own game attack. Have you been doing that on early questions in a game? That kind of attack is always suspect. Look for an easy one on early questions. 14 is our first mini diagrammer. We get T performed 5th, and then F performed 6th. And then don't forget to write this LH in or you can forget it very easily. The O is a little easier to see with this big arc here. But what rules come into play here? We're trying to figure out where S has to be performed. And the only rules relating to that are right here, these two down here. So let's see if we can figure out anything based on those rules. Well, O's in this one rule, right? And we know now O gets kicked into first because it can't be in the 5th spot. So at a minimum, we know S can't be here, right? Because it has to be at least 1 away from O. So we've now got 3 options for it. But these answer choices are asking about more detail right here. They're like, can we do 4th or 7th? Can we do 3rd or 6th, etc.? I'm going to write them all out quick. So let's see, have we answered it from knowing that S has to go at least in these back 3 spots here? We've kicked out D and E, but what about the 3rd spot? So I think the easiest tack at this point is to see if we can put S in here. Well, then P goes in here. And then what other rules come into play? We haven't looked at this rule or this rule yet. TF, we've satisfied that. But can we get R far enough away from F? No, we can't. So if S is here, you run into trouble. So that knocks this out. And now there's only 2 options left. 4 and 7. And that gives us our right answer. We can kick 3 out. That's how I got at that. Another way that might have worked is, let's back up here a bit. And we know that S can't be second, right? And maybe we take a peek at this RF rule and we'd realize that R has to go somewhere up here, minimum. So R can be here or here. And then P is going to be the other variable that's stuck in there in front of S. So the earliest we could do is say PR and get S into 4th is the earliest we can get them. And then you know this from another route, that it's going to be 4 or 7. 3 is not possible. These 2 were already kicked out. Pretty tricky for an early in the game question, but A's our correct answer. 15 gives us a new rule that O is immediately after T. So we get TO. And that means that O is not going to be possibly in that 1 spot anymore, right? Otherwise, there'd be no room for the T. So we throw T and O into here. And at that point, it was a little hard to see where to go next. So I'm looking at what rules might apply. Always look to the rules to save you. And here, this TF possibility is gone, right? O's occupying that spot. So I know we're going to need RT. So then I throw the R right here, and then I can kind of keep making a chain of inferences. Now the F, to be far away from the R, has to get kicked into these back spots. Remember, this is HL. Easy to forget that. Now our only 2 possibilities for F are here and here. Now if you look at the answer choices, we don't have to choose between those, right? There's no single choice like just saying F can only go in 6. It's 6 or 7. And that gives us our right answer. Another very hard problem. Okay, 16 throws S into 4th. I'm writing my HL so I don't forget it. And we got to figure out here who could be performed 1st, 2nd, and 3rd. Well, SO have to be apart, right? So SO here, that's no good. I'm looking at that rule naturally because I'm looking at rules that apply to S. I'm going to throw O into here, and now I also know that P has to be out in front of that. So now we know that O and P are out in front of S here. My first thought at that point was, can I eliminate any answer choices based on that? Let me write them out here so we can talk about it. All right, here are the options for the first three. And with O and P in there, it's pretty apparent that you got to eliminate all these ones that don't have O and P. And we're left with just 2 remaining. And this is a natural thing to do. Remember, after you make inferences, like when we figured out this OP, I'm going to want to check and see if I've answered the question already. And no, I haven't answered it, but I can switch tacks and see that at least I eliminate 3 of these answer choices. So I get them eliminated, and now I just got to try one or the other of these, and if it doesn't work, then it's not the answer. If it does work, then it is the answer. So I try OPR first. I drop the P and R into here. I got to get the F at least 3 away. Let's just stick it right here. We have the TF flying in there, and then HL can take up the back 2 spots, HL, HL, and everything works just fine there. We've satisfied all the rules, and we know that could be the order of the first 3, so we've got a right answer, C. 17 is yet another mini diagramming question, so I throw P in third, S in 6. I know by now that's going to kick O into first, because it has to be 1 apart from S minimum. Put my HL in back in case that comes into play. I put my HL in back in case that comes into play. And then it gets a bit tricky from here, and that's why this is one of the most difficult problems I've ever seen on an ordering game, a basic ordering game. But you have to remember that even though this is an OR option, it's going to take up 2 consecutive spaces, regardless of which it is. So once I see that we've only got 1 place to put that, I know that this is going to be either T or F, or alternately R or T. And that's a pretty tricky inference, so after that, I'm seeing if it answers the question. We're trying to figure out the composition that must be 5th. It must be either F or H. No, because it's either T or F. So I'm scanning through these and I'm looking for T or F. F or O, no. T or F, yeah, C gives it to us. F or T, and that's the right answer. Very, very tricky. And again, what happens is get stuck, what's going to save you? It's always the rules. So try and look for something. If you focused on this rule, you're not going to get much help, right? So try and jump to the other remaining rule that hadn't been addressed, and that's what's going to help you out of your jam there. Okay, 18, the last question, gives us a new rule. It says that F has to be performed exactly 2 before O. So we get a block rule of the type that we're more familiar with a fixed order. And that's going to require that O get shifted into 5th, otherwise we wouldn't have space for F. So F will then go 2 in front of that. At this point, I didn't really have much ideas about what to do, so I looked at the question again, and we're just trying to figure out where R must be performed. So if I get an acceptable order going, I'm going to be good, right? So I focus in on the R. Where's it going to have to be? Well, it's got to be at least 2 away from F, right? So that means it's popping out into the back here. HL is filling this back spot. What else can I do? S has to be a minimum of 2 away from O. That's not really helping me very much. So I just tried to pop R into here, take care of the T rule while I'm at it, get P here, S here, so that I'm following this and following this, and then what's left? Either H or L or H or L. And everything's good here. So the R landed in 6 for that. And I got lucky trying it the right way first, but that's often how it goes down, right? So don't be shy with trying out acceptable scenarios to find one. Often in these back questions, they're trying to force you to do just that. And the people who get down to business and do it faster are going to save a lot of time. Okay, so that's the game. Very tricky for a basic ordering game. I hope you did well. If not, shelve this one and come back to it in a few weeks or a month and see how you do on it again. Okay, see you on the next game.